What's good, Yugioh team? It's me, your boy Squid, back in another Squid video. Let's talk about some cards you guys should pick up in time for Valiant Smashers, as well as the other sets that are going to drop within the next couple of months. I think these cards will actually trend upwards in price, so if you guys haven't already, this is the time to pick these up. Starting at the top is none other than Crimson Dragon. We already talked about this in the previous video, but guess what? Centurions are actually coming out, and they do make extensive use of this card because they have a 1.5 card combo across multiple cards that allows them to easily go into both an N-Engine level 12 synchro as well as a second copy of a Crimson Dragon. And then from there, using the Crimson Dragon, you can easily go into a powerful negate like Archfiend Calamities to lock out your opponent from playing for the turn. And because Crimson Dragon only has basically the one printing other than the quarter century rare, I think people might actually think, hey, you know, this is a good buyout and start to buy this card out. While it's still floating around $12 right now, I think this is the time to grab it. You probably have a week or so to do so before it actually spikes up. Next is another card along the lines of Centurions, and that's actually Cosmic BLAZAR Dragon. So apparently this card only has a one ultra rare holo printing as well as a common holo printing, but this is the secondary target in addition to Archfiend Calamities that you do actually run in tandem with Crimson Dragon inside of the Centurion deck. And the reason why you would make this instead of Calamities is that Calamities can actually miss timing. So if your opponent hits you with something like a Book of Moon, and you want to chain the Crimson Dragon, you're not going to be able to go into Calamities and still get the effect to trigger. Instead, Cosmic BLAZAR Dragon is a much safer option here. It provides a stable Omni Negate when it banishes itself, as well as stopping the potential summon of a monster or an attack in grind games. So this is definitely a secondary option that the deck does play. So between those two cards, I think you should definitely pick up one copy of each so you can either have it or you can trade it off later. Next is a card that's a little bit obscure, but that's actually Amphibious SWARMSHIP AMBLOWHALE. Well, why this card? It's a generic random Link 4. It just happens to be the only Link 4 fire monster that's somewhat decent in Fire Kings. And if you guys have been keeping up with the recent product updates on YugiohCard.com, then you'll know that Fire King Structure Deck, the revamped edition, is actually coming out in less than a month, meaning that this deck is actually decently good, especially with the new support that they're getting. And there are a lot of new support for fire monsters actually coming out within the next year, including cards like Bonfire, which is basically a Rhoda for a level 4 or lower pyro monster, as well as this card, Promethean Princess Bestower of Flames, who is a generic League 3 that allows you to resurrect any fire monster from your graveyard, but also locks you out from special summoning except for fire monsters while you control her, which is why it's necessary to link climb to your AMBLOWHALE after you've used the effect to resurrect a monster of Promethean Princess. And AMBLOWHALE actually fits right into the Fire King deck because he does have the effect where if he's destroyed by a card effect, you can actually target a Link 3 or lower monster in either player's graveyard, resurrect it back. So you can actually, during your opponent's turn, pop the AMBLOWHALE and bring back the Promethean Princess and then start playing again. So it's really, really nice that you have, you know, follow-up as well as the ability to disrupt your opponent, because he has a second effect where it says, if a Link 3 or lower monster on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect while this card's in your graveyard, you can banish it from your graveyard, destroy one card on the field. So what am I saying? Well, this card is very nice. It's only at about 25 cents for the rare copy. There's also an ultra rare printing that came in the special edition that's around $4 or $5. So this is definitely something you want to pick up, especially if you want to play Fire Kings moving forward. And I suspect it will be actually a popular deck. So now's the chance to get this card. Next, let's talk about another Fire King card. Well, TENKI. I know we already talked about this card, but I'm telling you guys, TENKI is a good card in the Fire King's deck. Not every Fire King deck currently plays it in the OCG because they do have Bonfire, which is probably a better option. But while we don't have Bonfire until January, and Fire Kings come out in December, that means we're going to have a couple of weeks of non-Bonfire Fire King, which means TENKI fits right in because you're able to search your powerful monster negates like Fire King, Avatar, or Arvada, which can negate things like Nibiru, right? You might want to drop this on the board immediately so you can have that safe padding, because he actually does negate the effect of a monster effect. So it's very, very important to have this set up onto the table, and TENKI just happens to roll it directly into it. Obviously, you have some copies of TENKI that you can kind of choose between. There are different foils. There's the secret rare. There's the quarter, I think there's a quarter century rare. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But there's an ultimate rare that's really, really nice, and there's also a collector's rare that I know of. Next is a card that I think, well, I'm a little bit on the fence of, but it's actually the Wanted / the Sinful Spoils engine, maybe in tandem with Dark Witch. Now, these cards have already gone up in price. They're around 80 bucks for the Wanted, and I believe about 20 for the DLB Star. So it's a little unfortunate they were floating at around $50 a couple of weeks ago. But that being said, this is an engine that's highly playable in the Fire King deck because you're able to summon the new Baby Phoenix Ponix, who happens to be a level 1 fire monster. And of course, you guys already know that this engine's highly playable in the Rescue Ace deck, which is still going to be tier 1 moving forward. And I think that the fact that it's so useful and there's dual utility in the Fire Kings and the Rescue Ace, as well as potential Infernoid stuff when we do actually get that support sometime next year in the dual terminal world side set, then these cards will actually go up maybe a little bit more in price, go up to 100 or even more. And the fact is, they're not going to get reprinted at least for another year, guys. These cards just came out, right? So you cannot wait for reprints to happen. And if you do want to play these types of decks that do have the level 1 fire starter monster, then you will have to incorporate this engine into it. So I think, you know, if you have the necessary funds and you do actually play quite competitively, then it's a good time to actually pick these cards up just so you do have them, because they do actually fit into a lot of different decks. We are also, of course, getting further Sinful Spoils support in the Phantom Nightmare set that drops next year, and that is actually in the form of Snake Eyes Populous, which is a very powerful card that slots right into all of the decks. This card is especially powerful because when he's added to your hand, except by drawing him, you can actually summon him out, and then his effect allows you to trigger to add a Snake Eyes Spell trap card from your deck to your hand. So he's almost like a better copy of DLB Star of the Witch, because you don't have to invest any cards. You can actually play Wanted and add this, special summon this, then immediately add the original Sinful Spoils card, and then you have a card to send, right? Whereas DLB Star, you kind of have to send a card to special summon herself out, and then send the card. So this card has zero investment. It's basically a better version of that. And not only that, but when you send her off to the graveyard for the original Sinful Spoils effect, she actually triggers and comes back into the owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell card. So then you have something else to send even further off of a consecutive card that you want to trigger, like a Dark Witch or whatever the heck you want, right? Just having this card as a resource is really, really valuable. So I think Wanted will actually go up when this card does come out. Next card you guys should definitely pick up is none other than a hand trap. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, especially if you want to bling out your deck. Now's a good chance to pick up the ultimate rare or the quarter rare copies, because this card is actually decently good against the Centurion engine. These guys, for those of you guys that don't know, actually place themselves as continuous traps in the spell and trap zones, and then have a quick effect where they can special summon themselves out during your main phase or your opponent's main phase, and using the field spell, they can quick synchro into plays during your turn. So that's very, very annoying, and Ghost Ogre happens to do the job. It's a very, very crucial card that disrupts a lot of their choke points, especially when they're trying to resurrect any monster from their trap zone. So it just pops it immediately, and they do not get the monster summon, and they do not get the effect nor the body to synchro summon with. So now is a good opportunity to pick up this card. Obviously, this card does have other applications in the future against certain decks. The next card you guys should pick up is another hand trap, and that's none other than my boy Skullmeister. This card at Secret Rare is about 20 bucks, and the Collector's Rare is about 40, so it's quite cheap right now relative to the high rarity for what it does. And this card is actually highly efficient against Fire Kings because these guys all trigger in the graveyard. There are powerful monsters like Fire King, Sacred Phoenix, Garunix, who actually resurrects himself back from the graveyard during your turn to disrupt the board, as well as Fire King High Avatar Kirin, who when destroyed allows them to actually summon a Fire King monster from their graveyard or their hand. So you definitely want to stop these effects. They are critical choke points, and just being able to have that versatility, like we can even stop cards like AMBLOWHALE trying to banish itself from the graveyard, right? And on top of all that, in Phantom Nightmare, there are a couple of new archetypes that do actually trigger in the graveyard. For example, the Silent Forcers. They have a critical monster called Saphira, the Wise Silent Forcer Queen, who allows them to banish herself from the graveyard to ritual summon a monster, foregoing the ritual spell card entirely, which is absolutely nuts. So being able to stop that with Skullmeister is a critical key component in the choke point for that deck's combos. And you can see in the OCG recipes right now, a lot of people are actually citing Skullmeister because it's efficient against Fire Kings, and it's also efficient against Saphira. And not to mention, it does a lot of job against Unchained cards as well, right? There's a lot of crossover. The Unchained trap cards and the spell cards, and the monsters do trigger in the graveyard, so being able to Skullmeister that served as another copy of Ash. You know, people were already experimenting with Skullmeister previously when Unchained were at the top, just solely for Unchained, but now it has a lot of crossover between matchups, so now's the opportunity to pick up Skullmeister, especially in high rarity if you guys want to bling out your deck. And then next card and the last card is the preparation of Rites. So this is jumping a little ahead into the future, but you know, one thing I noticed when I was surfing TCG Player is the quarter century rare that just came out for the 25th anniversary edition for pre-prep of Rites is so cheap. It's like $7 or $8 for a quarter century rare. And guess what? This card is actually broken in ritual decks, especially Silent Forcer. Those of you guys that don't know, Silent Enforcer is actually a ritual-based deck that's tier 1 already in the OCG that drops next year in the Phantom Nightmare deck, the booster pack rather. And Silent Enforcer Prayer is actually a ritual spell card that's in engine, which allows you to actually mention Ceravis, the Ancient, and the Ascended. It also mentions their key card, the Skull Guardian, the Silent Enforcer Protector, or better yet, Saphira, the Queen of the Dragons. So having a pre-prep of Rites, which is an absolute staple of 3 copies in that deck, allows you to add both the ritual spell card as well as any copy of those monsters. You can pick and choose, you know, whichever one suits your combo, you just add it directly. So an instant +1 that has 0 drawback in a ritual deck is an absolute no-brainer. And I suspect the quarter century rare of this will actually skyrocket in price, because by then, in a couple of months, its 25th anniversary will not be in production anymore. It'll be very scarce. And also, this card will be at max rarity, so guys will want to pick this up. Definitely have this for the ritual deck. So yeah, that's about it for all we had for the Squiddy Watch this weekend. Do you guys have any cards that we missed out that you think are valuable in picking up, or any cards that you disagree or have comments on in the list that we went over so far? If so, let us know in the comments below. Other than that, definitely like the video and subscribe, or should I say Squiddio. Other than that, we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.